afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Supplying electricity to the national grid, whether it's from the private entities, residential companies, or businesses such as BICO, or whether it's commercially done by the Barbados Light and Power Company or independent power producers, IPPs as I'll refer to them in my presentation, is a process that has to be carefully managed by all policyholders and stakeholders. And today I will give you an idea of the Fair Trading Commission's role as the electricity regulator in this process. Now, we have heard several references to the Barbados Light and Power's Renewable Energy Rider. And this pilot program was submitted to the Fair Trading Commission for review by the Barbados Light and Power in February. And we had a consultation on it, a public consultation where persons could give their concerns about the program. Now, the Barbados Light and Power we didn't require to have a hearing on this program. It was an experiment. And also this program provided a credit for customers, so it wasn't a matter of customers having to pay more money or a greater tariff for their service. But we felt it was necessary to review the program in respect of its reasonableness and the terms and conditions that it would be providing. Now, for some of you who may not know the legislative framework of the Fair Trading Commission, the Fair Trading Commission regulates electricity rates under the Utilities Regulation Act. And we established the principles for setting rates. We set maximum rates. We're also concerned that with the interest of consumers, and we also ensure that an efficient service provider can finance its operations. So if we look a bit at what issues were raised during the public consultation, one of the biggest ones was the compensation or the level of the credit. And as you have been told, the RER credit is equal to 1.8 times the fuel adjustment clause. Now, the fuel clause adjustment is a pass-through of the costs that Barbados Light and Power pays for fuel to generate its electricity. And using the August data, and I think this figure is not inclusive of VAT, the RER for August would have been 52.443 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, during Mr. Clark's presentation, he made a reference, and I'm not quite sure if I got it right, whereby he was saying that if Barbados Light and Power used renewable energy, that they would be making a profit from the fuel adjustment clause. And I'm not sure where that perception came from, because if the Barbados Light and Power Company is going to installing wind energy or any other photovoltaic system that would see them using more renewable energy to produce electricity, then we would see that the conventional systems that they use would be using less fuel. Therefore, that fuel adjustment clause would be suitably adjusted to take into view the fact that less fossil fuel would be used in the production of electricity. The RER is based on the avoided cost of fuel. In other words, the fuel that would be displaced by the Barbados Light and Power Company by the use of photovoltaic or wind energy systems. Now, some of the respondents' view with respect to this compensation I have highlighted here, and with respect to the last one, that was where it was thought that there should be a difference depending on whether it was wind systems or photovoltaic systems. That, I think, was highlighted by Mr. Clark. The Commission, however, did not consider that this Renewable Energy Rider pilot program was meant to be a source of a mechanism for investment compensation. And we were satisfied with the methodology that the Barbados Light and Power Company proposed with respect to the value of the credit. Another issue was the size of the particular individual installations. There was a limitation of 5 kilowatts for systems used by domestic service or general service customers, and for secondary voltage power or Large power customers, which are commercial operations, the limitation was 50 kilowatts. This was questioned by the respondents in the public consultation. However, the Commission has some concerns with respect to the fact that this new pilot is going to be changing the system of electricity generation in Barbados, which is now a centralized system, to one which is going to be using some distributed power from distributed systems. And we also recognize that these systems are not always, that they have, they are not always predictable, and there are other concerns with respect to the impact on the operation of Barbados Light and Power's protective systems, as well as voltage fluctuations that may occur when these systems are input into the electricity network. We, in effect, supported the limitations because we recognized that this was an experiment, and the whole idea was to get a sense of what was going to happen before the system was put into permanent implementation. Originally, the pilot project was supposed to be for a 3-year duration. Persons thought that it should start immediately and we should go full-fledged into it as a permanent system. Other persons thought it should be shorter. And in the end, in our decision, the Commission said that the pilot program should last for no more than 2 years, and the Barbados Light and Power Company has started the pilot program at the end of June. Now, the Commission, in protecting the interests of consumers, also reviewed the associated contracts and service requirements of the RER pilot program. We were especially concerned with the language of the contracts because we recognize that this program was meant to be for all classes of customers. Therefore, the contracts and the agreements and even the guidelines on installation of this system should be such that persons can understand it, and important aspects should not be buried within legal and technical language. We were especially concerned that consumers should be made clearly aware that in order for them to implement these systems, they would need not only to get approval from the Barbados Light and Power Company, but from the Government Electrical Engineering Department, which is responsible under the Electricity Light and Power Act for all installations and connections to the national grid. It was also important that these contracts had appropriate exit clauses so that if persons, after they've signed up to them, recognize that there were issues and they wanted to come out of the contract and come out of the program, that facility was there, and that there was also facility for dispute resolution. Now, a pilot system was a new thing to Barbados, but it's something that has gone on within the electricity industry for some time. I've just bringing up here an example of what happens in Tampa. They had quite a creative scheme whereby customers voluntarily decided that they would like some of their power to be from renewable sources. So they were prepared to pay an extra $5 per kilowatt per 100 block of kilowatt hours to say that they wanted to get some of their energy, some of their electricity from renewable sources. Now, the power company had conventional power systems as well as power systems using biomass, solar, and some other renewable type of systems. So this was a way where the onus was on the customer to buy into the whole concept of, yes, we want to have renewables because we know what the advantages it can have for our country as a whole. Now, this pilot program started in 2000, and in 2007 it became a permanent. The electricity company applied to the regulator, who is the Public Service Commission, for the pilot to become a permanent project, and the regulator approved it. And in approving it, the regulator took into consideration several things. They looked at the marketing program, the business plan of the company, They recognized that this program is one that needed to be marketed because it depended on the buy-in of consumers. They also looked at the submissions of 6-month reports. The Fair Trading Commission is also going to be receiving reports from the Barbados Light and Power Company, quarterly reports on the renewable energy rider. So we too will have a sense of how the program is progressing, how people are buying into the program, if there are any operational or technical difficulties with it, and so that if Barbados Light and Power, so that at the next stage when we're looking at making the program a permanent one, we have a good understanding about what has been going on. So, as I said, after the 2-year pilot period, what next? The Barbados Light and Power may submit to the Commission their desire to either continue the program in the existing format. There may be changes in the format and the terms depending on what they have found during this 2-year period, or there may be the unlikely event that they may discontinue the program. And with respect to this, I know there were a lot of concerns raised in the public consultation, but the Barbados Light and Power publicly advised, and both the public and the Commission, that for those persons who had signed on during this pilot program period, their connections would continue under any modified form that has been discussed with the Fair Trading Commission. Now, the RER program isn't expected to give more than in the region of 1% of Barbados' light and power's peak power. So if we really want to move this whole idea of renewable energy, electricity from renewable energy forward, we will have to seek to get it from more commercial operations, persons that are in this as a profit, as a business, and either the IPPs, as we talked about earlier, or Barbados Light and Power putting in systems using renewable energy. In opening up the market to IPPs, we recognize that this matter was discussed quite a couple of years ago with respect to the draft energy policy and with other discussion about it. The Commission had 2 concerns, and they related to the legislative framework that currently existed, whether companies could just set up and just start and go ahead to sell electricity to Barbados Light and Power, or whether, if that was not the case, what legislative changes would have to go into place to allow persons to enter into this industry and for it to become competitive from a generation perspective. Some suggested in reviewing the current legislation, we recognize that currently, right now, if persons wanted to sell electricity to the grid, they would have to have the appropriate license. So the appropriate agency would have to be you would have to define an appropriate agency to deal with the licensing of IPP operations. If you, as a company, decide you're going to have a renewable energy system such as BICO and you're just producing for yourself, a license isn't required. But if you are seeking now to sell it for a profit to the Barbados Light and Power system or to the grid, then there may need to be some legislative changes to accommodate that. Additionally, the legislation may have to speak more clearly towards how the Commission gets involved in the regulation of the independent power producers, or if it's not the Commission, which other government entity will deal with these sort of things. In bringing IPPs into the market, they would be concerned about the power purchase agreements that they would have to have between themselves and Barbados Light and Power Company. They'd also be concerned about the interconnection of the systems, because we all want to make sure that our systems remain as stable as they have been over the past couple of years. Now, with respect to reliability, the Barbados Light and Power currently has an obligation to supply service 24 hours, 24/7 to the whole island. This is part of their universal and service and their licensing responsibility. If IPPs are brought into the market who are producing electricity to the national grid, if they come into this, we would also have to put the same sort of obligation on them. If that does not happen, then they will be in a position where tomorrow they can close down their operations, or tomorrow they may have some technical difficulty, and the Barbados Light and Power will always have to be able to have enough standby power to be able to supply power to the country in the event that any of these independent producers are not able to produce the electricity that they had committed themselves to do. So in the licensing of them, that is something that has to be considered, the obligation to provide reliable power on a very high percentage reliability basis. And as I mentioned, in the regulation of electricity, there are various entities involved: the Commission, the Ministry, the Government Engineering, the Government Electrical Engineering Department, to name some of them. And all of the roles of these various entities will have to be clearly defined in any revised legislation that we have. We've recognized that IPPs are very capital intensive, and I've just noted a couple of promotional initiatives here. With respect to portfolio requirements, that refers to having a particular percentage of capacity that the Barbados Light and Power is obligated to purchase from any new independent persons. So it would be a case of, okay, I am a new provider, I'm going to set up a new photovoltaic plant, and I know that Barbados Light and Power is obligated to purchase a certain amount of capacity for me. Therefore, I get some confidence in knowing that when I establish this plant, I will have a market for it. There's also the question of feed-in tariffs, because when the Barbados Light and Power purchases power from the external source, it's possible that that power may cost more than the conventional source. So in that case, if it's a policy decision that so much must be purchased from an external source, the difference or the additional costs for purchasing renewable energy power, if such is the case, would have to be passed on to the public through an increased tariff or through a special tariff associated with that. I'll just quickly look at some other jurisdictions and some approaches they've been using. In Canada, they have a Green Energy Act, and they have also adopted portfolio requirements whereby the company in their expansion plans has to include generation from external entities. They are also very concerned about cost responsibility and cost recovery. In the first instance, when they first started the project, they believed that it was the generator, in other words, these new IPPs that would have to pay for any modifications to the network to facilitate their being connected. And in that way, that did not involve the consumers. The consumers then did not have to pay that charge. But now they have been rethinking this approach, and they believe that some of the upgrades, the system upgrades that the company has to make, may be of a general nature, and in that case, there would not be specific to the IPP. So the costs associated with any of that upgrade, they are of the view now that maybe those costs should be passed on to the consumers. Some other approaches relate to the ability to recover costs at certain milestones. And in the rate of return system that we have now, we talk about being used and useful. So if a company, let's say if the Barbados Light and Power Company was building a plant, a photovoltaic plant, they would only be able to put the money for that plant into what we call their rate base if the plant was actually operating. This approach that the OEB in Canada was looking to allow some of that money to be put into the rate base before the actual plant became operational, so that over time the customer would be starting to pay for this new system. Closer to home, in Jamaica, they had an energy policy analysis in 2005, where some of the initiatives they looked at and some of the recommendations included a national energy fund, They also, again, thought about portfolio requirements where a certain amount of capacity had to be bought from the new entities. And they had quite an interesting concept with respect to the costs of the conventional systems. While they agreed, or they were of the view that customers should pay the difference between the cost of a renewable energy system and the conventional one, they were of the view that the conventional system, an additional effective charge should be put on them for cost to society. And we know earlier today the minister talked about the cost of this. We heard about cost with respect to carbon emissions, and also cost with respect to society in general by having these conventional powers, these conventional type of generation systems. So if this concept was adopted, then consumers the difference between the renewable energy system and the conventional one will be less, and that would benefit any additional charge that may have been put on consumers. So in conclusion, I just like to state that when we look at incorporating electricity from renewable energy sources into the grid, we need to take into consideration the revision of legislation. We may need to actually come up with a new piece of legislation because the Electricity Light and Power Act is quite dated, so it may be easier to have a new act to deal with matters relating to renewable energy. The reliability of the electricity network also has to be taken into consideration, the efficiencies of IPPs, recovery of costs, and the effects on consumer rates. Encouraging or subsidizing inefficient IPPs will unduly burden the customers and may also put the reliability of the Barbados National Network at risk. So I'd like to say that the Fair Trading Commission remains committed to working towards the move towards renewable energy, and we will continue to work within the legislative framework of any revised policy that is put forward. I thank you.